Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Beginning a new Masechta. We're learning Yoma, the Masechta that talks about Yom Kippur and the beautiful service, the Avodah Beis Hamikdash, that the Kohen Gadol would do. And as Rashi tells us in the beginning over here, the Masechta, that all of the service, all of the Avodah of that day was done exclusively by the Kohen Gadol, that even though that in parts there would be assistance from others, but the service, the Avodah, was done entirely by the Kohen Gadol. And that the Kohen Gadol had some requirements. The Kohen Gadol needed to be Torah prepared, and so they would set him aside for 7 days, and that in case the Kohen Gadol became invalidated somehow, that there was a replacement Kohen Gadol set, and made sure that the Kohen Gadol could do the Avodah properly. So we're going to learn a little bit about the Avodah that he did and the preparation, and amongst that we're going to learn also the structure of the Beis Hamikdash. And so the Mishnah begins. Shivas Yamim Kodem Yom Kippurim Mafrishin Kohen Gadol B'Beisa L'Lishkas Paredin. Shivas Yamim, 7 days Kodem Yom Kippurim, before Yom Kippur. Mafrishin Kohen Gadol B'Beisa. You separate the Kohen Gadol from his house. That means he leaves his home. L'Lishkas Palhedrin, to a particular bureau, Lishkas Palhedrin. Umaskinin loy kohen achat tachtav. And we also prepare another kohen in his place, meaning that we would measure out and prepare clothing for the kohen, for a second kohen gadol, in case this kohen became invalidated. And since the avodah, the service, is meant to be entirely by the kohen gadol, so if he becomes invalidated, the rest of the day's service, which is important once a year, this avodah comes, and the mitzvah to go into the Holy of the Holies and to atone for Klal Yisrael, for the Kohanim. So there would be a replacement Kohen set, and the setting means that they would measure out his clothing and prepare everything for him in case he needed to be inaugurated, and do the service on that day in Yom Kippur. Anytime midday, he can step in as the relief kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Af isha acheres maskina." The halacha is that the kohen gadol should have a wife, must be married, and have a wife at the time of doing the service, doing the avodah. And as the Mishnah is going to tell us in a moment, for the source of that. Now, she may die, and then midday he's going to be without a wife. Shema Tamos, maybe she will die. Ishtai, maybe his wife will die. And how do we know that he needs to be married? And he will atone for himself and for his household. Beisod, minimum of the household. The Beisod would mean Ishtai, his wife. Amrulai, so they said to him, well, if you're concerned about death, that somebody is going to die, normally we have a cheskas kayim, a cheskas chai, that the assumption is our person is living now and it will be living tomorrow too. The need to separate another woman to that he would then marry, and so it should be his wife. You don't have to be concerned about that, because if you're concerned that about death, well, that woman may die too, so you can have a second and a third and a fourth. Obviously, that's ein l'davasof. There's no end to the concerns that you would need to have. So therefore, we don't do that. Rather, all you're concerned about is the replacement kohen itself, and having clothing set for him so that it would fit him properly, because that's an obligation of the kohen gadol, to have a kohen gadol, and that his clothing fit him properly, the special clothing of Yom Kippur. Now, there's a lengthy discussion here in the poskim, in the Tosfos, and so on. When is there a concern someone may die, and that there's a need for some sort of consideration to that? And when is there no concern, and we say cheskas chai, somebody's alive, the assumption is that they are alive and remain alive. Tanan Hasan. The Mishnah says elsewhere also there is a separation for a of a kohen for 7 days, and this is in regards to the red heifer, the para aduma. The para aduma is the carbon, the atonement offering, the chatas offering that would be brought, but very differently than most other karbanos. It would not be shechted in the Beis Hamikdash. It would be shechted on Mount Olives, Har HaZeisim, off to the east of the Har HaBayis, facing the Beis Hamikdash. It would spritz some blood that way, and its ash from the burning of this carbon would then be put into mixed with living waters, meaning waters from a spring, and this would be spritzed on someone who was tamei in order to make them tamei mace, somebody who had come into contact with the dead, in order to make them tahor. And it was a particular process. Now, to introduce this Gemara, we have to introduce the machlokas, the struggle that Am Yisrael had with the Tzedukim, the Sadducees, who created an alternative interpretation to the Torah, essentially saying their lack of belief of Torah Shabbal Peh requires them, the oral Torah, requires them to reinterpret the Torah, and they did. And they reinterpret the Torah in many different ways. And they had particular things that they said, the rabbis were being way too lenient. And one of them was in regards to the paraduma, the red heifer, where the Sadducees said that in order for a kohen to take care of and burn the red heifer, they have to have been not only to the mikvah to make sure that they are pure, but also they have to wait till the evening, because if they were not pure and they went to the mikveh, we've learned many times now that somebody went to the mikveh after being impure, tamei, that they are a tvul yom, someone who went to mikveh that day and still retain a certain status, even though that they've gone to mikveh, so they're tahor, but a certain status of the tumah that they had until such time that the sun sets and a new day begins. Well then, the Sadducees said that a kohen who's a tevul yom, someone who went to the mikveh that very day, cannot burn the red heifer, the paraduma, and that's not the halacha. The halacha is that a kohen that's a tevul yom may take care of and burn the paraduma. So the Kohanim, the Chachamim enacted that every kohen that takes care of a paraduma must be a tevul yom, so that they would make him tamei. They would make him impure in the morning, have him go to the mikveh, and that afternoon he would take care of the paraduma before sunset. So this way, it proved, it didn't prove it, but it established, it showed that that's the custom, that's the practice, that even a tevul yom can take care of the para. Now, this is a leniency that, even though that it's true that that's a kohen, that's a tevul yom that gone to the mikveh that day and the sun hadn't set, is allowed to take care of the paraduma, but you don't have to have that. So the Chachamim insisted on a leniency in order to extract this incorrect teaching from the Sadducees. As a result of that, the Chachamim added some stringencies to in regards to Tumah and Tahara for the Paraduma, because to sort of counterbalance their leniency that they were pushing in regards to which kohen status is allowed to do the Paraduma, as we'll see. Tanan also we learned over there. Shivas yamim kedem streifas hapara. 7 days before the kohen is going to take care of the paraduma, meaning shecht it and bring the carbon and burn it. They would separate a kohen, and that didn't necessarily have to be a kohen gadol. So they would separate a kohen from that burnt the paraduma from his household, from his house, lilishka, to a bureau. Which one? Shalpanei abira, that was in front of the bira, which we'll see later what that is. Tzafona Mizracha, was on the northeastern side of the Beis Hamikdash. As we've talked about, to enter the Beis Hamikdash, you would enter from the east, heading east heading west. And so if you turn right, you would have the north there. So right as you come in on the northeastern side of the Beis Hamikdash, there was that bureau, usually on the upper level, and that's where they would separate this kohen too. And the Gemara soon is going to explain why, particularly to that bureau. Ulishkas Beis Ebenaisa Nikris, and it was called the chamber that had stone vessels. So why was it called the stone vessel bureau, the stone vessel chamber? Because all of its vessels were made of either animal dung that had been dried out, or stone, or earthenware. And the reason for that, why was everything in there made of these vessels? My time, and the reason is because really the halacha is that a tvul yom, someone who's gone to the mikveh that day, is kosher to do the paradum. The Tanan, as we learned, that they would purposefully and intentionally make the kohen tameh. Which kohen? Hasarif is a part of the kohen that was going to burn the red heifer, the paraduma. They would make him tameh. Umat bilanoise, and then they would take him to the mikveh that day. And that same day, prior to the sun setting, he would be the one to take care of the paraduma. And why did they do this? To extract this the incorrect teaching from the hearts of the Sadducees, who had changed the halacha and wanted to say that a kohen who had gone to mikveh that day is invalid for Saref Sapara, for the burning of the red heifer. Because the Tzedukim, wanted to say that it has to be someone who had not only gone to mikveh, but also had hair of shemesh, the sun had set, and only then can he do the red heifer. So this was a leniency that they enacted in order to show what the proper halacha is. And to counterbalance that, Tekinu la Rabbanan Kli Glolim Kli Avanim Kli Adama, so the Chachamim enacted that all either service parts, as it says that mostly there were not service parts, but whatever was in that chamber was all vessels that could not actually be susceptible to Tumah at all. They're not susceptible at all to Tumah, and by doing so, they increased the protection of Tumah in one area to counterbalance their leniency elsewhere, because of their leniency that they enacted in one place. They didn't want the Kahanim and people to think, oh, you could be very lenient with Tumah matters in regards to a paraduma, a red heifer. So in order for people not to be too lenient, the Chachamim enacted a stringency of only using vessels that are not susceptible to Tumah at all in that chamber, so as to counterbalance their leniency, which was done with the intention of extracting this wrong interpretation from the Sadducees. Now, why particularly did they use a chamber that was on the northeastern side of the Beis Hamikdash? So it's a reminder, an allusion to the structure of the paraduma, the red heifer, and the red heifer itself. Kivan the chatas, since it's a sin offering, v'chatas to unatzvayna, and the regular chatas, which is brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, or inside the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, and would always be shechted on the north side of the of the courtyard. Again, as we talked about, you walk in from the east heading west. On the south side of the courtyard is going to be there, from the southern wall, the ramp and then the Mizbeach itself. And on the northern side, at the wall is going to be the tables for rinsing the animals, and near there on the floor would be the loops for holding down the animals for the shechita. So that was the shechting side on the north. And a chatas needs to be shechted on that north side, as opposed to, say, a shlamim, which could be anywhere in the courtyard. And since the chatas requires a northern shechita, so the chamber for the chatas, for the red heifer, which the Torah calls a chatas, would be on the northern side. And it also says that the spritzing of the blood, which was not done in the courtyard, but as we mentioned before, it was actually on Mount Olives, on Har HaZeisim, over the next hill on the east, where they did the shechita, and it was done. The spritzing was done from that mountain, not obviously reaching the Beis Hamikdash, but towards the Beis Hamikdash, towards the oil mine. And since it was done across the next hillside, facing there, so that's off to the east. So Tikinu Larabana Lishka Tzafayna Mizracha. So it was on the northern side, but because it's chatas, and the eastern corner because that's where the avodah would be done, on the next mountainside on the east. So that there would be a recognition that this is the reason he'd been separated over there, specifically for that purpose of the avodah, the service of the red heifer, of the para aduma, which is considered a chatas, and needs spritzing on the from the east towards the Beis Hamikdash, and this would serve as a reminder to everyone why the Kohen was separated, and to the Kohen, so he'll remember the service and know specifically the parts of the avodah that are necessary for him to partake and to do. Now, it says that this chamber, this bureau, was on Pnei Habira. It was on the face of the bira, meaning in front of the bira. So what is this word bira? My bira. Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba Bar Bachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Makam Haya Bahar Abayis. There was a place on the Temple Mount, Ubira Shemai, and its place is called. This place is called Bira. So it's just on the face of the Bira, meaning in front of Bira, this particular place. However, Rish Lakish Hamakala Mikdash Kuloi Karabira. No, the Beis Hamikdash itself is called the Bira. Shenema, for it says Habira Asher Achinosi. The Bira which was prepared. The David is saying that the place that he had purchased for the Beis Hamikdash and set it for structure, so David, so Shlomo, his son, can build the Beis Hamikdash properly. So this is the Bira that he prepared. So we see that the entire Beis Hamikdash is called Bira. So this vessel, this chamber, was either in front of this other place called Bira, or it was, being that it was in the northeastern side, and so east, it was facing the entrance of the Beis Hamikdash itself, which was facing you as you walked in from east towards west. Now, back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that Shivas Yom Kedem Yom Kippurim, 7 days before Yom Kippur, Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mebesa, you separate the Kohen Gadol from his house to live in the Beis Hamikdash, essentially as a preparation. How do we know? Minahani Mili. How do we know that there's a need, a specific mitzvah to do such a separation for the Kohen? Amar Rabbi Min Yumi Bar Chilkiah, Amar Rabbi Chasya Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Kra. It says in the pasuk, and this pasuk is at the end of Parshas Tzav, after the instructions for the inauguration of the Mishkan, where it was a 7-day inaugural service, and the Torah enumerates what that service was, and on the 8th day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan was when it was complete. For the 7-day duration, it says over there in the pasuk that that Moshe told Aaron of Aaron and his children, that they would need to separate and live in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash. And then it says, and as you've done this day, Tziva Hashem la'asos, Hashem commanded to do, l'chaper aleichem, to atone for them, la'asos to l'chaper aleichem to atone for them. So too will be done for these. So just as you're doing now, moving into the Beis Hamikdash to be ready for the service, so has Hashem commanded. As you're doing this day, so has Hashem commanded. Tziva Hashem allows us to do l'chaper aleichem, to atone for you. Now, that atonement is seems out of place because it was for the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash. Why does it say Hashem commanded to atone? This is really a separate. This was a part of the inauguration, not as an atonement. So must be that what this is saying is, as you are doing today, moving in, so too Hashem commanded at a future time you're going to have to do a similar thing to as well. L'chaper aleichem to atone. So lasos elamase para. So when it says Hashem commanded to do, that's for the para, for the red heifer. L'chaper, and to atone, elamase yom kippurim. So just as you're doing now, moving in to the to the Mishkan, to live in the Mishkan, so too Hashem has commanded for you to do by the red heifer, to atone by Yom Kippur, that you're going to move it. Now the Gemara says, Bishlam Mekuli Kraba Para Lemetuka. Now we can't say it's all talking about the red heifer by the Para Aduma, because Lachaper, it says for atonement, and the red heifer, the Para Aduma, is Lataher, is a service to do in order to bring Tahara, purity, but not Lachaper to bring atonement. Opara labas kapari. The para is not the red heifer. The para aduma is not made for atonement. So we know that the word lasos cannot mean, this verse cannot mean exclusively for the para aduma, but it could mean exclusively for the atonement of Yom Kippur. Who tells you that the red heifer needs to be separated as well? The Kohen doing this, the para aduma, also needs to be separated. Maybe he also. He doesn't need to be separated, and it's exclusively, the entire pasuk is only talking about Yom Kippur. Amri Yalef Tziva Tziva. Well, we have a drash, because it says Kasher Asa B'Yom Hazeh, just as you've done today. Tziva Hashem Lasas, Hashem commanded that you do. Ksiv Hacha Tziva. It says over here Hashem commanded to do Tziva Hashem Lasas. Ksiv Hasam, and it says over there in regards to the red heifer, the Para Aduma. This is the commandment of Hashem. This is the statute of Hashem, which Hashem commanded to you, saying. So just as over here it says, this is what Hashem commanded to do. Over there it says, this is what Hashem commanded to do, and therefore we learn with the comparison of the hekesh of the word tziva, to tell you that where it says elsewhere tziva, it applies to this as well, the separation of 7 days and living in the Beis Hamikdash. Mal halam para, just as over there it's about the para aduma, that's the parsha. Afkan para, so too over here when it says tziva Hashem lasis, Hashem commanded to do, it's talking about the red heifer. Umakam prisha, and just as over here it says to separate it for the inauguration of the Mishkan. Aflahala prisha, so too over there it's talking about the separation for the Para Aduma, for the red heifer. Now we go to Beis Amid Beis. Maybe this is also talking about the when it says that Hashem commanded to do well, that's by Yom Kippur itself, and there's only one separation, the Kohen Gadol for Yom Kippur, and it says to atone because that's what he does, and Tziva, the commandment, is also because it says the commandment by Yom Kippur as well. It says it says at the end of the service of Yom Kippur, the end of the Avodah, that Aaron indeed did that which Hashem had commanded Moshe. So from the fact that it says that he did that which Hashem had commanded Moshe, we see that Moshe, that the word tziva, the commandment that Hashem commanded, is in the parsha of Yom Kippur, and if it's in the parsha Yom Kippur, when we say that Hashem commanded in the separation of Aaron and his children by the inauguration, that so has Hashem commanded to do to atone. It's all one thing. The atonement of Yom Kippur, Hashem commanded to do that you separate, and so the commanding, the word command and the word command are compared all about Yom Kippur. So Gemara says, no, that's not a fair comparison. Done in Siva de Lefnei Asiya, Mitziva de Lefnei Asiya. The over here it says, so has Hashem commanded prior to the actual doing of the report, that the Torah reporting that it was done. In other words, so has Hashem commanded to do, as opposed to by Yom Kippur, it says, so as Hashem commanded was done. So the done it makes it a different kind of command. It's a report about what was commanded was done, as opposed to a report what was commanded should be done. And therefore, the comparison to the Parah Aduma is more appropriate, because there too, it's at the beginning of the parsha, at the Hashem, these are the statutes of the Torah that Hashem commands to do. This is at the beginning. So too, we're going to compare that to where Hashem's commanding to separate Bnei Yisrael. So that's before they are doing it. That's the initial command. And it's not a good comparison to compare the statement at the end of the Yom Kippur Avodah, the end of the Yom Kippur service, where it says that indeed he did as Hashem commanded, to compare that and say that the meaning, the hint that the Torah is giving when it says so as Hashem commanded to do, to atone, that it's all talking about Yom Kippur. So Gemara says, okay, accepted. So we now have a superfluous word, if you would, Tziva Hashem. And we're going to try and compare something to that, to say that this is alluding to another place where Hashem commanded, and that there the Kohen needs to be separated. You want to say that it's talking about the Parah Aduma, the red heifer. Perhaps not. Perhaps it's talking about another commandment, another place that the Torah, Tziva, that Hashem commanded a certain avodah, a certain mitzvah of service. And that's where you have to separate the Kohen. The Gemara says, Ve'ema tziva the karbanos. Maybe it's every karban. Every single karban, it says, in regards to the karbanos, tziva, as it says, b'yom tzavoises b'nei Yisrael, on the day that he commanded the b'nei Yisrael in the mitzvah of karbanos. And we would say that every kohen is going to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, needs to separate 7 days and live in the Beis HaMikdash before he can do the service. Perhaps that's the part. That's a part of the preparation that every kohen needs for the avodah. And as difficult as that itself may be, but maybe that's the meaning here. So Gemara says, "Done in tziva mitziva, vein done in tzavoisei mitziva." Gemara says, no, the word is different. In the separation commandment, where Moshe says to Aaron and his children that so as Hashem commanded to separate, to atone, there it says tziva, commanded. By karbanos, it doesn't say it doesn't say commanded tziva, but tzavoisei, on the day that he made the commandment. That's different. Slight, but and the context is the same. The meaning is the same, but it's a different word. It has a different conjugation. It's on the day that he commanded, as opposed to on the day of his commandment, as opposed to the day that he commanded. We're not going to make a comparison and say that when the Torah says the day that that of his commandment, that it's the same word, and therefore compared to the day that he commanded, tziva, we're not going to compare tzavoisei to tziva, and therefore we're not going to say that when the Torah said you have to separate, that Hashem commanded to separate and live in the Beis HaMikdash, that it's referring to every kohen doing the service. Umay nafkamina. Gemara says, why would you not learn the meaning, the context of the same, of the word is the same, and we know that that's a valid form of comparison of the wording of the Torah. Matana, we learned even more than that. Matana the Rabbi Shmuel. We learned in the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, and this comes up many, many times when the Gemara is trying to learn a comparison, a hekesh. And the Gemara shows from this coming verse that the hekesh is contextual and it doesn't have to be the exact conjugation, the exact form of the word itself. In fact, even just the same meaning is going to be a good comparison. In this week's parsha, we learn about tzaras. It's a double parsha, Tazria Mitzorah, and we learn about tzaras. The tzaras, let's call it leprosy, of the flesh of a person on their body, of clothing, and of the house. And the halacha with the house is the din that the kohen would have to come and see the blemish in the house, have those bricks removed, replace them, and they would replace it and seal it, and then would come back a week later to check and see whether it would have the same blemish. And over there, the Torah doesn't say specifically that it had a blemish. That again, you would cut it out, cut out those bricks, replace it, and put it back. But we learn from the Kohen coming a second time to check it that just as the first time, he would have to cut out those bricks, replace them, and seal it up with some plaster. And then the second time when he came, he would do the same. However, the wording is not the same. It says in the first one, V'shava Kohen, the Kohen would return. The second one would say V'shava Kohen, the Kohen would return. And the first one it says Uba HaKohen, the Kohen came. The first time the Kohen came, he would replace the bricks, cut out the bricks, replace the bricks, and plaster it. So to the second time, where he's going to do the same. And we learn that by comparison, even though that the wording is different, V'shav is return and Uba is come, but both of them mean to come into the place. And so we see that a comparison of context and of meaning is enough, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same word. Zuhi Shiva, Zuhi Bia. The coming a second time and coming a first time means coming. And so we're going to compare them. So how can you tell me that, no, we're not going to compare the word Tziva, where it says in regards to the separation of the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash prior in the Mishkan prior to the inauguration, it says Tziva Hashem commanded, and over here it says B'yom Tzava Yisei, on the day of his commandment. So that's a different form, and so we're not going to compare the two. Actually, we find even a greater distinction being compared and for halacha, as we have the teaching of Rabbi Shmuel, V'shava Kohen Uba Kohen, that the return of the Kohen and the coming of the Kohen is the same meaning, the same word, Zuhi Bia, Zuhi Yeshiva, coming back and coming is the same meaning, and that the halacha is the same, that they has to cut out the stones and replace it and plaster it. So we see that the halacha does make a comparison, even if the word is not exactly the same. So Gemara says, and this is something that comes up many times, that the Gemara is going to continuously say this idea, that Hecha deleka de damile, when you don't have, in context, you're not going to have another word that is exactly the same, then I'm going to go to a similar word or a similar concept. But if you have a place where the word is exactly the same, like in our case, where you have the para aduma, by the red heifer, it says, these are the statutes of the Torah, Asher Tziva Hashem, then Hashem Tziva, the word commanded. And so it's exactly the same to where it says, this is the command, this is what Hashem commanded to separate. So the same word Tziva. So of course, then I should go to the most similar word and compare that. And therefore, this is a good distinction and to separate out and say, no, not this doesn't mean every Kohen for every avoda is going to have to separate for 7 days, because the word is slightly different. So therefore, we're going to go to the one that's the most alike. However, over there in our parsha this week, in regards to the tsaras, the leprosy or the blemish in the house, where we're learning a separation, the structure of what the system of what the kohen would do for removal and replacement of the stone, that word coming versus coming back is going to be the same context, the same meaning, the same, and it's going to be a fair comparison because I don't have in that system a more alike word to compare to. Okay, so we now have for the paraduma, we had the red heifer, Tziva Hashem Lasas, that Hashem commanded to do. That tells us for the red heifer, for the paraduma, that's the first part, that it has to be separated. The kohen is going to be separated for 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash. L'chaper, elu masa Yom Kippurim. And when it says to atone for Bnei Israel, that's the separation of the kohen for the service of the Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, how do you know that? Ve'ema kapara de karbanos. Maybe here it means every carbon, and it says atonement, as we know. It says many times when a person brings an individual carbon for themselves, it says v'chipar alav hakohen. The kohen will atone for him. Multiple times it says this. So maybe every individual carbon that a person brings, the kohen who does the service for the individual is going to have to separate for 7 days in advance. So indeed, the kohen whose job it is to who merits to do the daily offering in the morning, the kohen who does the various communal obligations, the musaf or whatever it may be, all right, he doesn't have to separate for 7 days, as we said before. Tziva is not going to tell you every kohen, but it says l'chaper, to atone, and every individual carbon or many individual carbonos for a person, they are to atone for that particular person. So that atonement carbon, maybe that's what it's talking about. And every kohen who's going to work and get the job to do a particular service of an atonement for an individual has to have separated for 7 days. Now, who this kohen is going to be is unclear. Miyadina. Do we know Hai Kohen Misrami? Which one is going to turn out to be? Rashi indicates that this was done by lottery. Questions that, wait, who says it was a lottery for that? We know that there were lotteries for a lot of the communal service. But either way, if there's a communal service lottery, so then that means the kohen is going to be doing the avodah for the avodas tzibur, for the communal service. So he gets a lottery. That means that the other services for the private people bringing a carbon, that's going to be the remainder of the kahanim. In any case, but we don't know who this is going to be. So if the Torah means that anyone doing a service, doing the avodah for a particular kohen, for an individual kohen, is going to have to separate, so who tells you who that's going to be? How do we know who to separate out? Hai kohen misrami, the baile prisha. How are you going to know which kohen requires that separation? So the Gemara says, Amri, all right, why not? Let's require for the entire Beisav, the entire family that's on the service of that day, that they should separate for a week before that service. So if there's a group of one family that's going to do the avodah on Monday, so the prior Monday they have to all separate for 7 days, and the group, the family, the household that's going to be doing the service, the avodah on Tuesday, so they have to come in on Tuesday. So the Gemara says no. We're actually comparing something that had a specific time. Done in davar shekavu leizman, medavar shekavu leizman. The inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash of the Mishkan had a very specific time, and we're going to compare something that has a specific time to that, which is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur has a specific time, just as the first day of Nisan was the inauguration. The first day, the 10th day of the 7th month of Tishrei is Yom Kippur. So it's a set time. But personal karbanos, it's possible any day, every day. Some days there were many, some days there were none, but it's an everyday affair. So that is not a good comparison. Okay, so you say comparing it to a set time. Well, let's say it's any of the Yomim Tovim, because many of the Yomim Tovim, many of the Regalim, for all of the Regalim, it says that there's an atonement offering. There's a lechaper. So if you're saying the word lechaper, to atone for Bnei Yisrael, means that the Kohen doing the service has to separate 7 days for that atonement, who tells you it's Yom Kippur? Maybe it's Pesach, maybe it's Shavuos, maybe it's Sukkot. The lav pamachas b'shonanin. So the Gemara says no, but that's not once a year. And again, we're looking for something that was once, because the inauguration was once, as opposed to, so Yom Kippur is a proper comparison, as opposed to Yantiv, which is multiple times a year. Well, then let's say one of the Yomim Tovim, maybe Pesach, maybe Shavuos, maybe Sukkot, but one needs a separation. So the Gemara says, well, that's great, but I want to know which one. For which Yantiv does the Kohen have to separate for 7 days? Maybe matzah, because that's the first that the pasuk mentions. Maybe that's the one that's going to have a separation. Or sukkahs. There are many mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of the sukkah every single day. There's a mitzvah of the lulav individually on the first day, and in the Beis Hamikdash for 7 days. There's also the mitzvah of arava, the taking of the arava and the encircling of the mizbeach. There's also the mitzvah of nisach hamayim, every day the pouring of the water, the libations, the nisach hamayim on the mizbeach. So there are a number of mitzvahs that apply to Sukkot. Even though that Pesach, there are also many mitzvahs, but many of the mitzvahs of Pesach are actually d'Rabbanan. The Seder itself is the Rabbanon. 4 cups is the Rabbanon. The mitzvahs of Pesach is the Korban Pesach and the Matzah Amar. So the Sukkot has a lot of mitzvahs. So perhaps that's the one that should be separated. The Kohen would need to be separated for 7 days for the kapara, for the atonement of that day. Ella, done in Prisha Shiva Liyam Echad, Prisha Shiva Liyam Echad. Rather, we're looking for a separation of 1 day, which is the 7 days separation for a single day's avoda, which is the Kohanim separating for the inauguration, which was a single day. I mean, it was a 7-day preparation, and 7 days they put up the Mishkan and took it down. But ultimately, the Yom HaShmini, the inauguration, was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And that 1 day had a 7-day separation. So too, we're going to have for a single day, a 7-day separation. Where do you have a single day Yantiv? That's Yom Kippur. Vein done in Prishas Shiva l'Shiva. And we're not going to separate 7. We're not going to say, oh, you need to separate 7 days for a 7-day service. What's the 7-day service? That's going to be the Yomim Tovim, Pesach and Sukkot. We're not going to learn that from and compare it to the inauguration separation of 7 days, the Prisha Shiva Liyamecha for 1 day. Ve'im Shmini. So Gemara says, wait, I have a Yantiv that's a single day, and maybe the separation is for that single day, and that's the last day of Sukkot, where it's a separate Yantiv. It's a Shmini Atzeres. It's no longer a part of the 7 days of Sukkot, so you don't have to sit in the Sukkah. It's an individual 1 day Yantiv, the Prisha Shiva Liyamechad. So maybe yes, the Kohen separates 7 days of Yantiv in order to be able to do the service on that 1 day of atonement of Shmini Atzeres. The Gemara says, that's not a good comparison, because the Yom Kippur has no Kedusha beforehand. The inauguration has no Kedusha beforehand. The Shmini Atzeres is a 7-day Yantif beforehand. That's not a good comparison of separation. So we're not going to compare something that has Kedusha in advance, so something that has a Kedusha beforehand. And the Gemara is going to say, we'll start tomorrow with this, the Gemara is going to say, wait, that should be a Kal V'chomer. That should be even more so you need to separate. If you need to separate something that doesn't have Kedusha beforehand, for sure something that has Kedusha beforehand, and it's a single day Yantif, you should separate if it also, the Torah says that it is l'chaper, to atone. So tomorrow we'll start with that question, where the Gemara is trying to figure out which other day we can atone, we can compare to l'chaper, to say that the atonement needs the Kohen separates 7 days. Perhaps it's Shmini Atzeres, and perhaps even more so on account of the 7 days of Kedusha beforehand. Yashakach, have a great day and a good Chodesh.